The holographic image flickered above the polished steel table, distorted slightly by the trembling hands of Ambassador Elias Carter. The conference room aboard the United Nations Starship Resolute was silent, save for the low hum of the artificial gravity regulators. Every delegate present, human and alien alike, stared at the projection with horror. It was a child, a human child, no more than 8 years old. Blonde hair, bright green eyes filled with terror. She was reaching out, pleading, her small face contorted in fear as two hulking, armored figures loomed over her. Then the sound came, something raw, something primal. A scream. Then the execution. The hologram ended. The silence lingered. Admiral Vasquez, a towering woman with deep-set eyes that had witnessed too many battles, clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white. Across the room, Secretary General Nishida of the United Earth Government leaned forward, his voice ice-cold. "This transmission was intercepted 3 hours ago," he said, his Japanese accent clipped and precise. "It came from the Tyrannies system, controlled by the Galactic Empire." The Galactic Empire, a coalition of over 50 alien species, ruling through fear and subjugation. Humanity had been a reluctant addition to their dominion, forced into compliance after the disastrous Martian negotiations 50 years prior. Earth had tried to play the game, to stay neutral, to avoid war. That neutrality had just been shattered. Elias Carter swallowed hard. He was Earth's official diplomat to the Empire, a man who had spent decades advocating for peace, compromise, coexistence. And now, a human child, an innocent, had been executed as a warning. He turned to the others, his voice strained. "Do we have any confirmation of her identity?" A young officer, barely out of the academy, hesitated before responding. "Her name was Emily Carter, sir." The room went utterly still. Admiral Vasquez's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. Nishida inhaled sharply. Several officers and politicians exchanged uneasy glances. Elias Carter's hands clenched. His vision blurred. His lungs refused to pull in air. Emily Carter. His niece. For a brief moment, everything in the room vanished. The politicians, the officers, the holograms. None of it mattered. All he could see was her smiling face the last time they spoke, her giggles as she told him about her school trip to the moon. She had been visiting Tyrannies on an educational exchange program. The Galactic Empire had assured the United Earth government that the colony was safe, that humans were respected, protected. Lies. His niece was dead, executed like an animal. Something inside him broke. "I will kill them all." The words escaped before he realized he had spoken them aloud. Admiral Vasquez nodded, as if she had been waiting for those words. She turned to her officers. "Mobilize the fleet." "All of it." Someone gasped. Another delegate, an alien representative from the ZYYTH Confederation, tried to interject. "Surely, we must consider." "Consider what?" Nishida cut in, his voice a razor's edge. "Negotiations? Diplomacy? A child was murdered by the Empire. There will be no talks. No peace." Elias Carter had spent his entire career preventing wars. But now, he wanted nothing more than to watch the Galactic Empire burn. The war had begun. The war drums of humanity pounded across the stars. Within hours of the United Earth Government's declaration, the Resolute transmitted a single message to the entire Galactic Empire. "You killed one of ours. Now we come for all of you." Earth's fleets had always been underestimated. 50 years of forced compliance under the Empire had made humanity seem weak, compliant, docile. The other species saw them as primitive upstarts lucky to have even reached interstellar travel. They were wrong. The moment war was declared, every Terran colony, shipyard, and military station went into full mobilization. The Iron Banner Fleet, Earth's largest armada, was already en route to Tyrannies 4. The Ghost Division, an elite Black Ops force trained for planetary sabotage, had vanished from their bases, ready to strike behind enemy lines. And the Einstein Initiative, a group of AI-enhanced strategists, began running war simulations. The countdown to vengeance had begun. Elias Carter had never been in a war room before. Now, he sat at the heart of humanity's war machine, surrounded by admirals, generals, and intelligence officers. The conference chamber aboard the Resolute had been transformed. Holographic battle maps filled the air, showing real-time fleet movements. He wasn't a soldier, but that didn't matter. His presence was a statement, a reminder. Admiral Vasquez stood at the center, her voice sharp as a blade. Tyranny's 4 is lightly defended. The Empire never considered it a strategic target. It has a single defense platform, a small garrison of Tavorian shock troopers, and orbital patrols. Our fleet will be there within 36 hours. We take the planet, we show the Empire what happens when they cross us. A young officer, Commander Julian Price, stepped forward. There's a problem, Admiral. Speak. Price adjusted the interface on his forearm, bringing up a secondary hologram. The new display flickered, showing the Tyranny's system from a different angle. We intercepted a transmission from the Empire. Reinforcements are on the way. 2 dreadnoughts, escorted by a full battle group. If we take too long securing the planet, they'll trap us in the system. Vasquez's jaw tightened. How long until they arrive? 48 hours. A silence settled over the room. Elias studied the projections. They had 36 hours before the fleet arrived. That left 12 hours, just half a day, to secure the planet and evacuate before they were overwhelmed. This just became a race against time, Vasquez said. We take the planet fast or we die there. The assault on Tyranny's 4 began at dawn. The Resolute and 5 other warships emerged from FTL at the edge of the system. Before the Empire's orbital defenses could even react, Earth's Hellfire missile pods launched. Hundreds of high-yield plasma warheads streaked through space, turning the lone defense platform into a fireball. Orbital patrol ships scrambled, but Earth's destroyers were faster, cutting them down with precise laser fire. On the ground, the first wave of human soldiers deployed. Among them was Captain Daniel Hayes of the 42nd Marine Division. A veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, he had spent years waiting for a moment like this. A chance to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. His team, call sign Reaper Squad, hit the ground running. The moment their drop pods slammed into the battlefield, they tore through the enemy defenses like a storm. The Tavorian shock troopers were twice the size of a human, covered in thick, chitinous armor. They were designed for intimidation, for terror, but they had never fought humans in a real war. Hayes' squad moved with brutal efficiency, their rail rifles tearing through Tavorian armor. Explosions rocked the landscape as air support rained down, reducing enemy fortifications to rubble. The fighting was intense. Close-quarters combat in the ruined streets. Knives flashing, gunfire echoing. But the humans never stopped, never hesitated. By the 8th hour, the city was in flames. By the 10th, the last enemy's stronghold fell. Tyranny's 4 belonged to Earth. But there was no time to celebrate. 12 hours. That was all the time they had before the Empire's reinforcements arrived. On the bridge of the Resolute, Elias Carter stood next to Admiral Vasquez as they watched the countdown tick lower. And then it happened. A warning siren blared. Multiple ships emerging from FTL. Vasquez turned to the sensor officer. How many? The officer's face paled. It's worse than we thought. A new hologram filled the air. The Empire's reinforcements had arrived, but not just a battle group. Leading them was the Hunter of Worlds, a legendary Imperial warship known for erasing entire civilizations. The odds had just shifted. Elias Carter exhaled. They had taken the planet. But now, they had to survive. And the real war had just begun. The Hunter of Worlds loomed over Tyranny's for like an executioner's blade. At 20 kilometers long, the Imperial dreadnought was more than just a warship. It was a symbol of absolute power. Entire planets had been reduced to ash beneath its cannons. Civilizations had surrendered at the mere sight of it. And now, it had arrived out on the bridge of the Resolute. Admiral Vasquez's expression was unreadable. But Elias Carter could feel the tension in the air. Give me a fleet composition report, Vasquez ordered. The sensor officer's fingers moved quickly over the holographic controls. 1 dreadnought, 8 battlecruisers, 15 destroyers, and a dozen fighter wings. They're moving into attack formation. Elias felt his stomach drop. Earth's forces had 6 warships, a handful of planetary defenses, and a battered ground force still recovering from the battle. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Vasquez took a slow breath. Communications. Open a channel to all fleet captains. A chorus of acknowledgments filled the bridge. A moment later, the faces of Earth's commanders appeared on the holo display. "You all see the situation," Vasquez said. "There's no retreat. If we try to run, they'll pick us off one by one. We hold the line here." Captain Redding of the Indomitable scowled. "We won't survive against that thing." Vasquez's voice turned sharp. "Then we make sure they don't survive us either." A grim silence fell over the officers. Then, one by one, they nodded. The battle was on the moment Earth's fleet powered up weapons. The Empire struck first. The Hunter of Worlds fired its main cannon. A beam of superheated energy lanced across space, ripping through the Valor in a single shot. The human cruiser detonated, its shattered remains scattering into the void. A heartbeat later, the sky became a war zone. The Resolute and her sister ships returned fire, launching missile swarms and railgun barges at the Imperial fleet. Explosions dotted the enemy formation as Earth's weapons found their marks. But the Empire had numbers, and they pressed their advantage. Enemy destroyers weaved between the wreckage, bombarding human ships with relentless precision. Fighters swarmed the battlefield, engaging in deadly dogfights. Earth's forces fought like demons, but they were outgunned. On the planet below, Captain Hayes and Reaper Squad watched the battle unfold from the ruins of a command post. The night sky was ablaze with streaking plasma and burning wreckage. Hayes muttered a curse. "We're running out of time." They had secured Tyrannies 4, but none of it would matter if Earth's fleet was wiped out. And at this rate, that was exactly what was going to happen. Then, something changed out. A sudden transmission cut across all frequencies. A voice, mechanical, distorted, ancient. "Human vessels. Identify." The entire battlefield seemed to hesitate. Vasquez turned to her comms officer. "Where is that coming from?" The officer's hand shook. "Ma'am, it's coming from Tyrannies 4. Elias's eyes widened. That was impossible. They had wiped out all Imperial resistance. There was no one left to send a transmission. Then the ground shook. From the ruins of an old Imperial fortress, something massive began to rise. A structure buried beneath the planet's surface. Ancient, metallic, alien. It wasn't Imperial. And then Elias understood. Tyrannies 4 hadn't just been a minor outpost. It was hiding something. Something buried. Something alive. And it had just woken up. The ruins erupted as a colossal war machine emerged. A towering mech, nearly a kilometer tall, covered in ancient battle scars. Its frame was unlike anything in known galactic history, sleek yet monstrous, its arms ending in weaponized claws. Eyes of molten red light burned from its faceplate. It was not Imperial. It was something older. The Empire had kept it buried, fearing what would happen if it ever reactivated. And now, because of Earth's attack, it had returned. The Colossus turned its gaze to the sky. And then it spoke. "The Empire tried to erase me. They failed." The Hunter of Worlds fired at it instantly. A blast of energy ripped through the atmosphere, striking the war machine square in the chest. For a moment, silence. Then, the Colossus walked through the blast like it was nothing. And it roared that on the bridge of the Hunter of Worlds, Imperial Admiral Zathran watched in horror. "No," he muttered. "This cannot be." A sudden movement behind him. A flash of silver. Then pain. Zathran gasped, staring down at the blade that had just been driven through his chest. A human combat knife. Behind him stood Torrin Vale, a half-human, half-Kryn officer who had spent years in the Empire's service. His voice was calm as he twisted the knife. "I told you," Vale whispered. "You should never have crossed Earth." Zathran collapsed, choking on his own blood. And just like that, the Hunter of Worlds lost its commander. With Zathran dead, the Imperial fleet hesitated. Confusion spread through their ranks. And Earth took the opportunity. Vasquez's voice cut through the comms. "All ships, focus fire on the Hunter of Worlds. We bring that thing down." Railguns, torpedoes, plasma beams, all of it converged on the dreadnought. And below, the Colossus raised its arm. A pulse of ancient energy gathered in its palm. Then with a single titanic blast it fired. The Hunter of Worlds never stood a chance. The energy beam tore through its hull, ripping the dreadnought in half. A shockwave followed, cascading through the Imperial fleet. Ships veered off course. Some exploded. Others tried to retreat. But the tide had turned. Tyranny's was no longer just a battlefield. It was the graveyard of the Empire's pride. The war had just begun. Elias Carter watched the wreckage burn. Earth had won the battle. But something far bigger had just been unleashed. The Colossus turned its gaze toward the sky, its voice echoing in all directions. You freed me. Now we burn the Empire together. Elias shivered. For the first time, he wasn't sure if humanity had won, or if they had just awoken something even worse. The wreckage of the Hunter of Worlds still burned in the skies over Tyranny's 4, its shattered remains scattering like the bones of a fallen god. Across the battlefield, the once invincible Imperial fleet was in full retreat. Some ships had already turned tail, breaking formation and fleeing to hyperspace, while others tried to reorganize, desperate to salvage what remained of their honor. But Earth was not in a forgiving mood. Target the retreating ships, Admiral Vasquez ordered. No survivors. From the Resolute, railguns thundered, missiles streaked through the void, and plasma cannons unleashed their fury. Every Imperial vessel that tried to escape was met with a barrage of unrelenting fire. One by one, they fell, battlecruisers gutted, destroyers torn apart, fighters consumed by fire. The slaughter was merciless. Elias Carter stood in the command center of the planetary base, watching as the Empire's forces were annihilated. He should have felt triumphant. This was vengeance. This was justice. And yet, something twisted in his gut. Something was wrong. The Colossus, the ancient war machine that had risen from the depths of Tyranny's 4, stood at the edge of the battlefield, its massive frame still smoldering with residual energy. It had not moved since firing the shot that ended the dreadnought. It simply watched. Captain Hayes, Elias said over comms, I need you to run a full scan on our ally down there. You think it's a threat? Hayes' voice crackled through the link. I think we just woke something up that we don't understand. The ground team had set up observation drones around the Colossus, and the data was coming in fast. The readings didn't make sense. It was absorbing energy from the battlefield, weapon discharges, reactor leaks, even the electromagnetic interference of destroyed ships. It was feeding, and then, without warning, the Colossus moved. It turned, its glowing red eyes locking onto the human forces below. Humanity, it said, its voice like grinding stone. You have fire. You have rage. But do you have wisdom? The question sent a chill down Elias's spine. Vasquez's voice came through the comms. Carter, what the hell is happening down there? I don't know, Elias admitted. The Colossus took a step forward, and the very ground beneath it trembled. Its metallic frame groaned, shifting with ancient purpose. It raised an arm toward the sky, where the last remnants of the Imperial fleet were still fleeing. Your war is not over, it declared. The Empire will return, stronger. Their wrath will be endless. And so I ask you, humans, do you seek survivals? Elias hesitated. The obvious answer was yes. But something about the way the Colossus spoke felt wrong. Vasquez, however, gave a swift answer. We fight until we're the last one standing. The Colossus turned its burning gaze toward the human fleet. Then you will require strength. More than you possess. More than your kind has ever known. Elias took a step back. What are you offering? A choice. The air around the Colossus shimmered. The wreckage of the battlefield. The ruined ships. The burning metal. The shattered remains of the Imperial fleet. All of it rose into the air. And then, before their very eyes, it began to reassemble. Not into Imperial ships, but into something else. The twisted remains of war formed into new machines, sleek, terrifying, weapons beyond anything humanity had built. Black metal warships with jagged edges, towering constructs that pulsed with energy, fighters that moved like living shadows. The Colossus was forging an army. You have awakened the architects of war, it said. We were the first weapons, the ones the Empire buried in fear. And now, we rise again. Elias's blood ran cold. This wasn't just an ancient machine. This wasn't just some lost relic of war. This was something far worse. Vasquez, he said quickly. We need to stop it. The Admiral hesitated. You just saw what it did. It destroyed the Hunter of Worlds in one shot. If it's on our side, we'll be fighting wars forever, Elias snapped. Look at it. It's not helping us out of kindness. It wants war. It lives for it. Hayes came over the comms. Carter's right. The energy readings. It's not just building ships, it's spreading. The entire planet's turning into some kind of war factory. Elias clenched his fists. The Empire had killed a human child, and Earth had responded with righteous fury. But now, something older and far more dangerous was offering them ultimate vengeance. And if they took it, would they become just like the Empire? Vasquez made her decision. All units, target the Colossus. The machine laughed. You would strike down your salvation? We don't need salvation, Elias growled. We need to end this war. And with that, the final battle began. Earth turned its weapons against the very thing that had saved it. The Colossus unleashed its fury, sending waves of energy through the battlefield. Human ships dodged, fired, struck hard. The sky burned with conflict once more. But this time, Elias knew this was not just a fight for survival. This was a fight for what kind of future humanity would choose. The battle against the Colossus raged across the sky and land, a storm of fire and fury that shook the heavens. Humanity had come to war against the Galactic Empire for vengeance, but now they found themselves fighting something far older and far worse, a machine god that thrived on endless conflict. Elias Carter had no time for fear. All ground forces, focus fire on its core, he shouted into the comms. Naval units, keep the airspace clear. We have to take it down before it fully reconstructs. The Colossus retaliated with waves of energy, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Its newly formed fleet of black metal warships swarmed the human vessels, their movements unnatural, precise, far too efficient to be piloted by anything living. And still, the Colossus laughed. You resist, but you do not understand, it said, its voice resonating like the death toll of forgotten gods. The Empire will never stop. Their hunger is eternal. You need me? Elias gritted his teeth. I'd rather fight them alone than become something like you. From the Resolute, Admiral Vasquez made the call. Deploy the Hellfire Bomb. Elias's stomach twisted. The Hellfire Bomb was Earth's most devastating weapon, a last resort device, designed not just to destroy, but to erase. If it was used here, on Tyrannies 4, everything would be gone. The Colossus, the war machines, the battlefield itself. Even Earth's forces might not make it out in time. But it was the only way. The Colossus saw what they were doing. You would burn your own victory, it rumbled. Elias clenched his fists. Better to burn this place than let you turn us into monsters. A silence fell over the battlefield. The Colossus's red eyes dimmed. Then, for the first time since awakening, it hesitated. It had not expected resistance. Not from humans. Not like this. And that moment of hesitation was all they needed. Detonate the Hellfire Bomb, Vasquez commanded. The sky turned white. A blinding cascade of fire erupted, engulfing the entire battlefield in an explosion that rippled across the surface of the planet. The war machines of the Colossus melted into nothingness, their dark metal torn apart by the sheer force of the blast. The massive machine itself roared in defiance, its form cracking, breaking, dissolving. No, it bellowed. You are making a mistake. You will. Its voice was lost as the explosion consumed it. The war was over. The Colossus was gone. But as the fires faded and the human fleet regrouped, Elias knew that something had changed. They had won. But at what cost? Tyrannies 4 was a wasteland. The Imperial fleet had been shattered, but there was no doubt they would regroup. Humanity had proven itself strong, but it had also proven itself willing to destroy everything to win. And somewhere, deep in the void, others were watching. Admiral Vasquez looked at the battlefield, her expression unreadable. We sent a message today. Elias nodded. Yeah, but I'm not sure if it was the right one. Vasquez sighed. Neither am I. The human fleet prepared to return home. But as the last of their ships left orbit, a faint signal pulsed in the ruins of Tyrannies 4. A whisper. A remnant. A warning. The architects of war were not truly gone, and the galaxy would never forget what humanity had done. The stars over Earth burned bright, undisturbed by the bloodshed that had scarred the void. Humanity had won the war, but the victory had come with a terrible price. Tyrannies 4 was nothing more than a ruined husk, its surface scorched beyond recognition. The Galactic Empire, reeling from the loss of their most powerful fleet, had withdrawn from the conflict, for now. The silence that followed was not peace. It was the kind of quiet that came before the next storm. Elias Carter stood in the shadows of the Earth Defense Headquarters, looking up at the holographic map of the galaxy. Red markers still littered the outer rim, denoting systems where the Empire's influence remained strong. Blue markers, human territories, had spread further than ever before, filling the void left by the Empire's retreat. But in the middle, in the lifeless black where Tyrannies 4 had once stood, was something else. A warning beacon. Still watching it, he turned to see Captain Hayes approaching. She looked tired, the way everyone did these days. The war had changed them all. Elias exhaled. We killed it, but I still feel like we lost. Hayes crossed her arms. You think we should have taken its offer? He shook his head. No, that thing didn't want to save us. It wanted to use us. But I don't think it's really gone. She followed his gaze to the hologram. The beacon, it had been discovered 3 months after the battle. A single pulse, buried beneath the ruins of Tyrannies 4. A low, repeating signal, encrypted in an ancient language older than even the Galactic Empire. At first, they had assumed it was a remnant of the Colossus, some final ghostly trace of its intelligence. But no, it wasn't a distress call. It was a message. Hayes sighed. What do you think it means? Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulling out a small data chip. He slid it into the console, and the beacon's signal played out in a rough, fragmented voice. You have fire. You have rage. But do you have wisdom? It was the same phrase the Colossus had spoken before the battle. The same challenge. The same question. Elias's jaw clenched. It's not just a warning. It's an invitation. Hayes frowned. Invitation for what? He turned to her, his expression grim. To finish what the Colossus started. The room fell into silence. Because in the end, the Colossus had been right about one thing. The Empire would return. They would gather their strength, rebuild their fleets, and they would not stop. And when they did, humanity would have a choice to make. To fight as they were. Or to become something else. Vasquez had already made her position clear. We hold the line, she had said, no matter the cost. But Elias wasn't sure that would be enough. Because the war hadn't just changed the galaxy. It had changed humanity. The United Earth Council had convened in a secure facility deep beneath the surface of Luna, where the scars of war could not be seen. Vasquez sat at the head of the table, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. Across from her sat Ambassador Rain, the official human liaison to the Galactic Federation, the coalition of neutral species that had refused to intervene in the war. This is a dangerous road, Rain said, his voice measured. Humanity has already proven itself capable of standing against the Empire. But if we pursue this, if we attempt to uncover the Colossus's origins, if we activate that beacon, we risk awakening something far worse. Vasquez's gaze was unwavering. The risk is irrelevant. The Empire will return. And next time, they'll come with everything they have. Rain leaned forward. Then we build. We fortify. We create alliances. Vasquez shook her head. We don't have time for diplomacy. Rain scoffed. You sound just like them. The room tensed. Elias watched as Vasquez's fingers curled into a fist. The war had hardened her. She wasn't wrong. Humanity needed to prepare. But he couldn't ignore the fear creeping into the edges of every conversation these days. Because the truth was, humanity had already crossed a line. And there was no going back that night. Elias sat alone in his quarters, staring at his personal terminal. The encrypted data chip lay on the desk beside him, its dark surface gleaming under the artificial light. He had lied to Hayes earlier. He knew exactly what the beacon meant, because for months now he had been studying it in secret, running its signal through ancient codebreakers, cross-referencing it against forgotten archives. And finally, a week ago, he had found something, a location. The Colossus had not been alone. Tyrannies 4 was not the only place where the architects of war had been buried. There were others, hidden across the galaxy, silent, waiting. A part of him wanted to destroy the data, to pretend he had never seen it, to let the past die. But another part, The part that had watched a child's name be erased from history. The part that had sworn vengeance. The part that had stood in the shadow of a machine god and refused to bow. Knew that was impossible. The war wasn't over. Not really. And if he didn't act first, someone else would. His fingers hovered over the terminal's interface. Then, slowly, he entered a set of coordinates. Far beyond the edge of explored space, on a dead world long forgotten, something stirred. And the beacon pulsed again. Do you seek survival? Elias took a deep breath and answered,